Eric suggested the international topic today, but if we find that that doesn't suit us and our interests right now, that's totally fine. But we could start, Carolyn, you've been here 1,000 times with introductions.
Yeah. So since we don't have a presenter today, we can just go ahead and not a whole ton of people. We can do our formal introductions. My name is Carolyn Burns. I use she, her pronouns. I work for the CLIO Institute, which is a climate education and advocacy nonprofit in Florida. Our headquarters are Miami, but I'm up in the Tallahassee office. I also teach biology and earth science classes at my local community college. And it's been about 2 years now that I've been helping CLEAN with some of their curriculum review efforts when it comes to adding new resources to the database. I think that's it for me. I'm just going to go in order of who's next on my screen. So Gina, you're up.
Sweet. Thanks, Carolyn. I am Gina. I am the CLEAN program coordinator, which is based at CERES, Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences at CU Boulder in Colorado. However, I am a remote employee coming to you today from Vermont. Just looking forward to chatting with you all today.
All right, James, my sometimes collaborator and partner in crime. Go for it.
We have to arrange the getting together the students from Florida with those in California and DC. So, okay, so let's see. Jim Callahan, Mobile Climate Science Labs, have been a educator and a mentor in climate education and action for 24 years. And to the proposed subject of the day, pretty much from the beginning, we would connect with programs that have similarities internationally. So that subject is something definitely can share what we know and want to learn what people are coming up with on that. Also, maybe there's some question, he, him pronouns. Also, if we have some time, I might ask some questions of Gina about the ambassadors program. There's some things of when to really put in for an event that ambassadors might be at. So maybe we have some time for some other smaller questions too today. And so should I go for Mark or Katie, or you want
Mark? I was just going with the order you're all in on my screen. So Mark, you're up.
And so is a cat.
And my cat. So yeah, hi, Mark Vanage. I'm calling from San Mateo, California, and I wear a couple of hats. Been in the early stages talking with Jim and Eric about a green jobs event fair, and on the East Bay here. I have Make Knowledge is the nonprofit I am with that is really doing a lot with career and climate in schools, and it's trying to triangulate that. And then on sort of off the side of that is I've been working with Kaylee too on their roadmap to green jobs for the state of California. So.
All right, and Katie, please go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone. Sorry I don't have a camera today, but I'm Katie Wolfson, pronouns she, her. I work for UCAR and NCAR as the School and Public Programs Manager at the NCAR Mesa Lab as part of the UCAR Center for Science Education. So usually one of my coworkers is on this call, but I'm going to start joining it about once a month too. So if you hear a rambunctious toddler behind, I have a very energetic sick toddler with me today. Looking forward to chatting more on this meeting today.
Awesome. Well, absolutely. Thank you. And from what I heard, I would definitely love to talk more about that aspect of the program if you're at all interested. I am going to, so I guess I'll kind of start when it comes to international climate education, with one of the avenues where I have found the most international collaboration and just learning from folks. Is anyone here familiar with Cornell's Civic Ecology Lab? I just dropped the link in the chat. And basically, they do professional development courses. There is a charge associated with them. It's like $60 a course, and they do 3 or 4 per year. I personally am a gigantic dork, honestly. Professional development is basically my hobby, and I'm working on a research portfolio to go back to school. But in the meantime, I'm scratching that itch by just signing up for everything, as is my want. Marianne Krasny is a really famous researcher in sort of the environmental education space. And they also, they have a book on their website, Advancing Environmental Education Practice. And you can buy a paper copy, but actually, if it's okay, I'm gonna just go ahead and share the screen. And y'all can see what I'm talking about. So here's the book, and you can download as a PDF for free. But here's the next course coming up, Environmental Education and Community Engagement. And for each course, there are generally several hundred participants. And I've met a lot of folks from West Africa, a lot of folks they have like an entire like separate section of the course that is in Chinese for participants from China. It's a collaboration, folks from the Caribbean islands, South America, throughout the Middle East and the Indian subcontinent. So yeah, I've been really enjoying them. I did this one last year, so I won't be in this next course, but that I guess is my offering. That's been a really great way for me to engage with and learn from environmental and climate educators all over the world. Oh, it looks like Deborah has joined us while I was on my while I was monologuing. So if you want to go ahead and do a quick introduction.
Hi, Carolyn. I'm lurking. I'm interested in climate change education, but I have no offering. I do love kids' offerings, and every so often, if I can think of a way to publicize them or link them somehow or support them in another way, then that makes me happy. Thanks.
Do you work in education now?
I was an science editor for kids. I'm trying to get back into it. So I've done articles for Scholastic and a lot of people on environmental education. I've tried pushing it at branding firms. I've gone around
Fantastic.
different angles. So there's just very smart people on this call. So it always gives me ideas for other things that I can do or tell somebody else about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
There's not that many of us, so don't worry about like raising hands and such. If you want to just add anything to the conversation, go ahead and unmute yourselves.
I'm curious.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead, Gina.
Sorry, my internet is such a. I didn't mean to interrupt anyone.
It happens.
I was just asking if I know Jim and Deborah pretty well. I see them often, and I was just wondering if Mark and Katie have any if they do any work actively in the international realm, or if they're just, I don't know, interested in the topic.
Yeah, so I guess I can am I doing anything actively now internationally? No, I guess not. But I do have a few things I'm a fan of. So one thing I'll put in the chat, and this has got to be 6 or 7 years old. This organization is probably 6 or 7 years old. It's the Office for Climate Education, based out of Paris, but a lot of good resources, right? I met those folks when I was at a conference at the Pontifical Academy for Sciences in like 2016, I think. So they've been around for a bit. They came out of, and honestly, I love their approach, and it helps me. I might be the only one interested in this, but they came out of this French organization called Le Main à la Pâte, which like put your hands in the dough, which is a very hands-on science education effort, also based in France, but for me, very, very encouraging to see what networks were active in that were not necessarily US based for me, right? So I think there's a lot of room for, for decentering sort of American voices in some ways, and hearing what's happening. I mean, these are both based in Europe, but big presence throughout. I mean, they're doing conferences and holding collaborations in lots of other places that are really, really fascinating. So I've had some experience working with materials from the original French one, the La Main à la Pâte, and then have definitely used the resources from OCE as well. So just think I would definitely want to see more cross-border collaborations, And I think it was especially in the era when it was like 2016. So on the eve of like Trump pulling out of a whole bunch of, international accords and so on, that all of which felt like going the wrong direction. And my personal preference would be, maximizing the networks and the exposure across borders.
That's fantastic. Awesome.
This is Katie. I can jump into. Oh, Deborah, did you have
Please.
something that you wanted? I was just gonna share too. In terms of actively working with international audiences, we do through our school and public programs at NCAR, we do reach an international audience with our virtual programs that we provide. So I just dropped a link to our website of our virtual stuff. But I would say a majority of our audience is still US based, but we do regularly have, we'll teach our virtual field trips to classrooms around the world. The biggest barrier is just time zone differences and time differences. But we've taught in the last, I'd say 6 months, we've taught to some students at usually it's like international schools that we'll be teaching to, because we unfortunately don't have any educators who can teach in a different language at the moment other than English. So we've taught to some students in China. Usually it's been our hurricane tracker program. And so we'll modify it a bit, talk more about cyclones there, and adjust our language a bit more, but we'll teach about tropical cyclones to students in China. I taught to a group of 4th graders in France the other month. I had a really fun virtual field trip we were teaching where I thought it was just a group of homeschoolers in a homeschool pod in Kentucky. But it turns out the teacher was in Kentucky and the students were international. So I had students on from Nicaragua and New Zealand, and then across the US from Florida to Alaska, all on the same call with me, which ended up being really fun way to have them talk about hurricanes and tropical cyclones if they happen where they live, if they happen other places, and just kind of modify it a bit more for that international audience. So that's been fun. And then we do also offer like a monthly Q&A with different experts. And those have and previously have been primarily UCAR and NCAR staff sharing out about their jobs and their career paths. But we're opening up a bit more, and our next one coming up is March 29th, I believe is the date, Wednesday, where we're going to be talking to an NCAR, UCAR staff, Marisa Vara, about pathways to STEM. And then the following week on April 5th, we actually have student experts who do climate action work. Anywhere from an 11-year-old who's going to be our speaker in the morning, and she's from Arvada, to a high school and college student in the evening, sharing their experience in the climate movement. And those we do market internationally. And so we delivered over Zoom so folks can join from wherever they are. And we did a similar, it's part of the BARD climate teach-in events going on. And so those, when we did an event last year as a panel, we had folks in Ghana and Australia connecting, I remember. So we do reach an international audience through some of those virtual programs. As well as occasionally have international groups that are touring and visiting that will come visit us at NCAR. But I'd say majority of those international ones we're reaching through virtual right now.
I love that. We do the program that I'm running right now, the Clear Speakers Network. It is sort of focused on, the U.S. and Florida in particular, because that's where we are headquartered. But and this is just something that I may just putting on your radar. We're currently offering simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish. Being based in Miami, we have a lot of folks who are, Spanish speakers who join us. And if that's ever something that you have the resources for, I think we have a partner. I'm not entirely sure of the hourly rate, but I think it's $80 to $100 an hour or so if you're looking at something that's on the academic side. So for something shorter, it's not crazy. So if you had like a partnership that was pretty solid and the only thing that was really holding you back was that language barrier, again, I don't want to make any assumptions about what resources you have at your disposal, but that is definitely something you can look into. I'm also providing transcripts, which can help with translation. And of course, there are also folks who do ASL interpreting for kind of live events. So
yeah, we've worked with an ASL interpreter. We're definitely open to doing it based on the requests that we get. And that's great to know that you might have some resources, because I know we've worked with one contractor for ASL interpretation, but we haven't had the schools that have reached out to us. We've asked, we've basically said, we can definitely provide it in English. Do you need it in a different language? And they said, no, English is fine. But that's not going to be always the case. So it's great if there are other resources or folks that you've worked with that kind of have that expertise too in the with the language, academic language on it.
Yeah, if it ever does come up, the service that we work with, they do both Spanish and Haitian Creole, because again, being Miami based, those are the main languages that that they're working with in the area. But I'm sure they probably know other folks as well. So yeah, absolutely. And Gina, go ahead.
I was just thinking as you were talking about that, Carolyn, that it just made me think about, we have I'm going to share my screen for a second. Someone else join the call. These are our guidance pages for Clean. And for a while now, we've had teaching climate and teaching energy guidance pages translated into Spanish. And one interesting that we found with analytics is that the Spanish pages some months do better than the English pages. I think that it's not only, obviously it's really great accessibility wise to have the translations, but I think it literally is helping with our analytics and driving more traffic to our website to have the translation. So we just we have other guidance pages that we just actually last week released in Spanish as well, on our website. I think that kind of serves as a, I mean, you're expanding your audience in a lot of ways by having the translation. So it was just kind of cool to see that from Dollar Analytics. Really, it's not just like a nice thing, it's actually helping and reaching people. So I don't know, your comments kind of reminded me of that, Carolyn, and nice thing to do. I wish we have also talked about translating into French, but it can be hard to find translators sometimes. So
Yeah, we've been working with this particular translator for several years now that we've been offering these services, and they basically just they've told us that they've learned a great deal about climate change just from working with us. They're like, well, we've basically been through your training program as well. I'm going to take a break and stop talking and let Lynn sort of introduce herself and contribute anything. We're talking about international climate education. And I'm going to go look over UCS, the Union of Concerned Scientists, just put out a climate change English to Spanish glossary. So I'm going to throw that in the chat as well, if anybody might possibly find that useful. I've sent it over to some of our Españolero employees when they do some basic translation, that they have it as a resource as well.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I'm a little late. There's a lot of background, my local Panera Bread. But just wanted to say hello, and I am going to try very hard to be very consistent as I can in terms of these meetings. I'm finding them very useful, not only in my work that I'm doing with adult literacy programs here in Baltimore, but also with some work that I'm doing with a community group that I helped to form, that actually has some connection to some communities in Tanzania. And so I was able to connect the young lady that we're working with Gina. And so I'm hoping that we can actually build out that connection as part of this group as well. So thank you.
Awesome. That's really cool. Working with folks all the way on other continents. So I just did put that link that I mentioned in the chat. There's a lot of like really sort of specific terms, and they put that together over at UCS for us, or well, not for us, the general climate community.
so cool. That's actually really helpful, because that honestly, that's one of our biggest challenges trying to find a translator in the past, is that it's not usually just everyday terms. Sometimes they're very scientific terms, and that has been an issue for us in the past, is finding someone who knows the scientific terms for climate change and energy in different languages. So I had no idea. It's awesome.
Yeah, and quite a few of them are also, sort of specific policy related as well. Breaking down some of the acronyms. So if that is, so if any of you guys are interested in, looking into that, that's something that you could maybe, provide to your interpreter ahead of time. They usually request, as much, and I can just sort of explain how it's been for us if folks are interested in the process. Ahead of time, they ask us if we have presentations, that we send them the slide decks, and if possible, speakers notes. We let them know who is going to be talking. There are options within Zoom to do. Our office administrator is worth his weight in gold. I'm not 100% sure how you set up the translation in Zoom, but they'll explain it to you. And so they can basically tune into a channel where they either hear you in English or hear the translator in whatever other language that you're offering. And so, yeah, the more resources you can provide them ahead of time, they sort of study that, so that when there is, when they do hear those terms, they don't kind of come out of left field.
I'm going to share this with my whole team, because everyone at Education Outreach, I think, is trying to move the Spanish translation along. And it's just very cool. I'm also wondering if anyone has experience with social media posting in Spanish, because we have been trying to do that more often lately, but and they do pretty well, but it's kind of hard to figure out what best practices are in terms of, like, is posting both languages in the same post making it too long, or is it better to reply to yourself? It's been kind of trial and error
We'll just do like the same post twice, a small amount of time apart, and the infographics and captions will all be translated. So basically every post we make twice. We don't really combine them into one. Our social media person is bilingual and is also kind of like a search engine optimization, like marketing kind of background. And she was saying that, because they're often going to be going out to like different markets and different people will be clicking on them, having them as separate posts helps a lot when it comes to your analytics. Because if people see something that's in English first, they'll probably just skim right past it, and they won't, like, people who are not primarily speaking or reading English are not going to be analyzing every post that shows up in primarily English just to see whether or not there's a translation provided.
I have a question about maybe a little out there, but I'm kind of, one of the things that international collaborations and education brings to mind is not just disseminating American information out, which is really, really good, but also being able to there's a couple facets of this, but also being able to bring in perspectives and stories from around the world. And I think there's a tie-in possibly to the well, I'm wondering how others on this space are feeling about this. Like, we think, like, if I'm developing something for the city of Philadelphia, that I can kind of draw a little, wall around Philadelphia. But the truth is, right, that the families who live in Philadelphia or California, which is way bigger or whatever, they're still in an active way connected to places far outside, right? We have so many students from so many places and so many families from so many places. And especially because the impacts of climate change are being disproportionately felt in island nations and the global South, it just feels like it's almost an inherent part of teaching climate change is bringing attention to the stories and making those connections available, not in a doom and gloom way, but in a in very real ways, educational opportunities, right? And I just wanted to see how that sort of bounces around with how the rest of you see it in your work. I'm just curious if that resonates with you.
I'll just say 100% yes. I think that having more voices from around the world and from different communities being impacted in different ways and to different degrees. Like, I mean, we talk a lot on our tours at NCAR about how, that everyone's being affected by climate change, but not everyone's being affected equally. So on those tours, we'll like invite people, since we sometimes have international folks on our tours, we'll invite people to like share out like what are some impacts wherever you live, whether that's here in Boulder, Colorado, if it's, another part of the country, another part of the world. that kind of thing. But I think that there is a way, right, of like sharing out those stories without it being doom and gloom,
Yeah.
right? And like, and also like, what are the solutions, or what are things that people are seeing, or like, what are things you see in your communities happening? I think there's a logistical piece that gets complex, but isn't insurmountable, right? In terms of like bringing those voices in, right? And like whether that's, I mean, you can host an event, right? If it's a virtual event, you can have people connecting in from all over on a panel or for a presentation or a series or anything like that. In my world, since we do a lot of, you know, regular offerings of programs of trying to offer the same program to multiple people, it gets a little harder that maybe we have recordings or something like that. I also just looked that I mentioned that one of our next two Meet the Experts programs, those Q&A with folks, is part of the BARD teach-in, which is a worldwide teach-in on climate and justice. And I just pulled up their little map of all their different events. I haven't clicked in on all of these, but they do have events happening all over the world. And so I'm just curious what some of those other international are. Oh, thanks, Carolyn. Positive international stories on climate change. I love that. I'm gonna look at that.
Yeah, it's a collaboration with National Geographic, Explorer, and PBS. I will say in general, as a resource, they do offer educator courses, including one on teaching global climate change. National Geographic Educators. That is a worldwide. I know it's National Geographic, but you know it's kind of a worldwide organization, and they do also have some really good resources and connections. So let me go see if I can find. Let me go see if I can find that page, because that's another place where I connected with folks from all over the world.
I will say that from like an educator standpoint, like I think it's about finding a balance too of like those international stories that might, you know, spark curiosity, interest, motivation, but then also connecting to that local community too, I think is going to tie in for that student relevance a lot, or for adult relevance too. So I think it's powerful to share those stories, international stories and international voices, and that's important. And it's also important to like make those local connections too. So it's finding that balance as we're developing things and programs or providing resources.
Carolyn, is it okay if I say some things?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay. In my experience when connecting with people internationally, there is, of course, seeking out connecting with people who describe themselves as climate educators or doing that work. But in the efforts I've worked in, or where I look at things, that's maybe 50% or something like that. And then the other 50% is people who are on broader subjects which welcome and would like to have climate change in action. And it's up to us to go connect with them, that they're not specifically around climate change. A couple areas. One is forms of education that are out in the community. You always hear me talking about the STEM festivals, but the STEM and science festivals are big in Europe. They're in Asia. They're all over. Another subject would be environmental justice, social justice. I mean, that's not we talk to the social justice people who talk about climate change. We would need to engage people who are talking about social justice and environmental justice on a whole bunch of subjects and relate and connect to it. So that's something I've always done. And in this conversation, I'm kind of looking back at some of the, long ago, climatechangeeducation.org, before CLEAN, had a big portal, and we did it internationally. So we would find a lot of international links and working that are in both of these categories, but maintaining that is a lot of work. So our links are really old, and when CLEAN came along, we kind of dropped it, but we've always had an international side to it. Anyway, I'm looking back at some of the old reliable, how are they doing, the people we always knew were good. And some of what I'm struck with looking at Europe in particular is both in environmental justice and in the STEM festivals, these giant science festivals that go on, that reach thousands and tens of thousands of people, is much more in Europe than the United States, the climate educators are engaging those programs. They're in the STEM festival. In the United States, we're one of the few that ever haven't to do anything with the STEM festivals, and we're proud to bring the Clean Network into at least the ones in the Bay Area and so on. But I'm also struck with what the climate educators do in Europe, and the picture of what climate education is completely unchanged in some respects. If you talk about it, it is white men with PhDs, occasionally white women who have master's degrees, giving lectures. It's a subject for experts to provide data to the public. And to me, it just cries out of, this is for experts to talk about and you to listen, but you can't do anything. If you're young, if you're Black, if you're of another ethnicity, this is for the people who already control science. This is not for you. There's nothing you can do. It's not engaging. It is lectures. And I'm kind of struck by that's still the case in Europe. And I think that's a lot where we see with Greta Thunberg or Greta Thunberg, speaking of, we're going to go on strike about an education system that doesn't want us to participate. So I think we have to kind of recognize that when our movement, climate education, continues to have this, we want to change things around climate change, but we don't want to change the status quo about society and how education works and who's included and who has a place at the table. Anyway, that's an observation that goes with it. And the best I can have is try and have an example where young people and people of color are active and play an important role and are taken seriously, and hope that catches on and we engage with others. We're being invited. One invitation we just got yesterday is to speak to a group that we connected with, the STEM for All Video Showcase, which is in 7 countries. And they're looking for young people who are in our organization to come speak with their climate action summit. And so that's encouraging, so it's tapping into their connections around the world. But anyway, just observations, and maybe people react to is what I'm saying off base. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely, I like to think that, CLIO at least is sort of part of the solution on that one. We're very, we're women-led, we're youth-led. We have primarily like young queer kids of color are our majority in terms of our student organizers, and they set a lot of our priorities in terms of what we're talking about. And admittedly, the Tallahassee Science Festival, it does not reach tens of thousands of people. It reaches tens of people. But yeah, you got to start somewhere. And I think that, this recent push for DEI in STEM is sort of like attempting, it's attempting, but we're, so much of the problem that comes from this is, we have to, like, there aren't people at the top. We've got that leaky faucet of people who aren't getting into those higher positions. And, maybe we need to take another look at what expertise looks like. I'm not necessarily saying that, the people, are going to be on the next IPCC report or something if they're not a climate expert, but they might be an expert on the impact of their community, and they should be, or maybe that should be another section of asking community leaders what it looks like for them, in addition to, your graphs and charts. I say this as someone where PowerPoint is my love language, but sure. Oh yeah, Deborah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Deborah. You're muted, Deborah.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt because you're all actively in the space and I'm trying to get back into it. And I love hearing the examples where kids are working together in different places to solve things, as opposed to saying, okay, this one in this area has an answer and this one in the other area has no information whatsoever. I love hearing the collaborative things. To what I was curious why you were picking the international focus, and I don't have as direct experience with the climate formats with James, but I did want to add one positive thing. I posted two things about Europe. One is, I mean, Lego is doing a lot of environmental education with kids in Europe and empowering the kids with engineering education. And there was the head of NATO used to be a representative to the UN for environmental issues. And in fact, NATO addresses climate insecurity issues as part of their defense. And the US, I don't think, does as much. So I think there's other perspectives that can be found from other countries and other audiences. I know this group focuses mainly on teachers to children, but there are different audiences that I think could benefit from the teachings that maybe aren't always thought of.
I do.
Deborah, I don't want to dominate
Oh.
this, but at some point I can throw in what I know about the U.S. Department of Defense on this. So
Oh.
there is kind of knowing what goes on there.
Oh, I was going to add in that no, it actively is in our national defense sort of policy, and then people go on cable news and complain about our woke military. So there's that. Where the people who actually have an understanding of national security recognize it, and the politicians in charge of the military budget find that to be a rather, here's a throwback, a rather inconvenient truth. But James, if you have more information than that, yeah, I mean, if there's anyone else who's been waiting to talk, absolutely go ahead and raise your hand and let us know. I'm well aware that I can be caught monologuing.
Thank you.
But otherwise I'll pass it over to James.
Yeah, and likewise, I just wanted to make sure we had a mark on that point you make, Deborah. But please, people might want to react. You brought up many important things. People might want to react things. I agree. I want this to be a conversation and not. But at some point, it is good for us to know, kind of what goes on with the U.S. Department of Defense. And you both are. Nothing anybody has said is like that's wrong. No, that's not wrong.
Thank you, because they have such a huge budget compared to the education department, that when I was looking for sources to do an environmental education program, it seemed kind of appropriate. So maybe I should ask you offline.
Well, I mean, I think it's important for us. There's a lot of different ranks. Absolutely, the European countries, it's much more going to be spoken by the defense industry, the defense departments in there, that they're going to openly say, we have to pay attention to climate change, our choices. This is going to be a cause of war, and so on. In the United States, I think, Carolyn, you might imply, if you imply there is one of the voices, it's one of the things that are spoken of, and it changes between the administration. It's certainly a factor. It's something that's talked about, the analysts will get it, and there's blowback, and there's all these questions. Under the Biden administration, it's going to be more spoken of than it would have been under the last guy. Another thing I think we have to note is, sorry if I anecdotally, Saturday we were at the big science festival. This guy is asking me, there were people ask me for my expertise, and I try to say that's not where I'm an expert of. Like, I'm not the know-it-all on climate change. I trying to do hands-on and trying to do students and so on. But he was bringing up how when we talk about what are the causes of climate change, what are the parts are, if we add them all up, he said like there was 180%. I said, I think it's more like 1,800%. Transportation, food, clothing, if you add up all those different sectors, well, one other way to put it is the Department of Defense is probably the biggest contributor to carbon emissions than any other part of the US government. When you consider what an aircraft carrier does, when you consider what the Air Force does, it's enormous. We have to take that, it's something to recognize of the price of what all that jet fuel and the diesel fuel and all the other stuff that does it. But I think it's definitely a case that there are people who are very much in it. One of the things I was really interested in about 2010, I was invited to the UN, the United States Embassy to the United Nations in Geneva to give a presentation to international people and bringing our hands on science, but it was organized by the U.S. military. So I got a check from the U.S. Department of Defense to go teach about climate change, and it was in there. It was kind of an interesting little bunch that came out of Monterey, California. So there's all these circles and there's different things. Let's just say the people who are aware. That term woke is definitely a very messed up term. Boy, that's a complex term now. But very aware of the science in the military definitely see this is both the military has contribution to climate change, and climate change is a defense national security interest. It will cause wars. It perhaps is causing wars. When you see what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, you can't say that energy isn't a big part of what's going on over there. Anyway, that's just some. So you're raising a very important point, and there's a lot to it. Thank you.
Yeah, I put a link in the chat that was basically about the conflict between in the previous administration, the defense chief, and how his assessment of national security was in conflict with, with the policies that were being put in place. So. Trying to be very circumspect here when I when I discuss this, but I'm sure we've all got thoughts and feelings on that. Oh, Mark, you're unmuted. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, just sort of, maybe a little bit underscoring Jim's earliest comment, but it just strikes me that, well, actually, I see ties like if the more we can create these international bridges, the more we can do two other things. One is like, Carolyn, you sent that great link to the Krasny book on advancing environmental practice and how it challenges sort of a theory of change, away from just filling kids with knowledge, facts about climate change leading to action, right? And so like, I think like to the extent to which we can engage students in stories and actions, including tapping their own expertise and background knowledge and indigenous knowledge and so on, that, we're moving the field forward and moving our work forward, but also in sort of these domains of our goal domains, right? So not just mitigation, which is where a lot of us, a lot of the work ends up, and adaptation, which I love the examples of adaptation that you sent. But then the third thing in transforming. So how do we make our lifestyles less extractive and, build more on relationship, on well-being? And there's so many examples of folks who are doing good stuff. Economists who are actually, creating new ways of thinking about thriving as a country and things like that, who are not based in the US. And the more we can build those bridges, the more I feel we can create positive, both way movement of ideas and action.
All right, we've got 4 minutes left. I would like to refer back to Gina if there's anything else that you want to see covered today. I know James posted a question for you in the chat, so is there anything else you want to be accomplished?
This is honestly a really good really good conversation for me to listen to. I think if folks want to stop, that's fine. Jim, it looks like Jim has a question about the ambassador program that Clean has, which I can try to answer in the next 3 minutes here. Jim, I honestly, one of my colleagues, Alicia Christensen, actually coordinates that, so I'm not sure how much I will be able to tell you about it, but I could try to take a crack at the question.
I mean, there could also, the answer for now might be to have her come on sometime and tell some things. Again, as I wrote in the chat, I could ask some questions of you and Katie or her and get answers that I hear, but I would think others probably, we want people to know about the Climate Ambassadors Program. And I think it would be like, when is it appropriate to request them, and how likely is the program able to supply people and things? So like this, on Saturday, we exhibited at an event that this year, because rain and after COVID, it drew 8,000 people. But I specifically talked to quite a number of teachers, K-12 teachers. And if there was an ambassador there, they could have spent much more time talking about the Clean Network. I could talk briefly about that because while they're with us, they're doing hands-on labs. They're seeing what we do. And but to go into the whole thing about the Clean, I can give them the card and they can look at the banner and they see we're connected to the Clean Network. But to have somebody there dedicated to talking to the teacher about using Clean, that was a good opportunity. But I don't know which events to request or not. Okay.
All right, well, I say I have nothing else to add, at least on this topic. If I could just, is anyone, does anyone have an objection to me having a quick little commiseration moment that is a bit off topic? One of our PD programs that we were hosting with one of the school districts in Florida was just canceled because our curriculum touching on climate justice is in violation of the Stop Woke Act.
It's good to know when things like that are actually happening, because we could perhaps,
They don't,
we need to know, when we need to speak out.
They refuse to say that that's why, but we all know that's why. Here's it said, the uncertainty of how the CLIO resources would seamlessly be embedded within district provided curriculum resources without causing additional time, work, or confusion for instructional staff is our primary concern. Adding additional curricular pieces at this time ELA, math, and social studies are navigating standards shifts, which are the priority at the moment. Adding additional curricular pieces at this time isn't ideal. And I call BS. So
that's clear code. That's code. We hear that code even in California, but it's the same code, but it's just applied in different ways. Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh, I guess maybe that shouldn't have been on the recording, but
well,
I don't.
You're reporting on what you were told by the districts, right?
Yeah, and so that's where things stand right now. HB 999 seriously making DEI programs illegal, seriously censoring higher education as well as K-12 education. I just want to say that the state of education in Florida is dire. I have never been this scared. I am deeply, deeply concerned. And if you know of folks in Florida, we're trying to have everyone possible call our legislators. We're in the middle of our legislative session right now. If you know of folks in Florida that you can help to mobilize on this issue, please do, because you know that this man is going to be running for president soon. And I do not want what is happening now to be expanded to other states. We are a laboratory for these kind of fascistic restrictions on education and free speech. And here I am reporting out of ground zero for this happening. So please keep us in your thoughts. And again, if you know of folks who are in the area that can also act on these things, we don't currently have a specific action alert. We have students coming out for what we call a lobby day next week, who are going to be meeting directly with legislators in Florida. I will absolutely post any of them that we have on the Clean listserv. And I know that places like ACLU are doing it. Lambda Legal is working on stuff. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough here.
Would there be one? No, definitely total empathy with you're doing, and you're fighting a very important front that we have. And one of the two of the curiosities I would have is, as the different PD programs and so on are adjusting to know, different ones to try different things, just to kind of like test or prove it. When you do a legal thing, you test it. Like, okay, so what if we were to add, if we were to also teach how and career development, that you have choices of becoming a coal miner. You can be out in the Gulf of Mexico on an oil rig. You could be a solar panel installer. You could do this. Oh no, we don't do career development in Florida. That's what you're saying. We're not going to look at any careers, and let people look at coal mining, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know how many coal miners you're going to want out of the kids in Florida. They're not going to come. But another one is the one that we can follow up on, and we're doing with other folks in Florida, is by student groups talking across the country about, this is what we're doing in California, this is what we're doing in Baltimore, this is what we're doing in Florida. You're going to try to stop that? You're going to say that students can't speak to other students about what they want to talk about? All right. So then you can see we're talking about burning the Constitution now, aren't we? That's just pretty straight out. That's just burning the Constitution. We're telling children, young people, not to speak with each other unless you approve of what they say.
He's calling it a hoax. People are posting pictures of their empty bookshelves waiting on approval from Big Brother, and he's calling it a hoax that they're not able to have the books in their classrooms. It's horrifying. Is what it is. It's horrifying.
But wouldn't there be the one though that what are we saying to the young people is that they have a role in this, that they can, this is one area where they can, this is another area they can take action, is to simply talk with other young people. That's not a hard ask. I'm not trying to make this easy. This is extremely hard. But just offering, that's one way I know we in other parts of the country can help, is by setting up those channels of communication. It's just one practical thing I think we can do. Do you think, Lynn, do you think there's young people that you work with in Baltimore that might want to talk with students in Florida?
I don't really work with a lot of young people in Baltimore. I primarily work with adults, but I asked for the information because I am connected with some other folks that do work with young people, and I am connected with a few folks in Florida. And so if you had something, that I could send out, to our allies that I know of in Florida, please get that to me sooner than later, and I will definitely share that.
Yeah, I think it was only just really announced that it's formal, because because we just started the session. It just got out of committee, and we have had in-person events with like student walkouts and everything about it. I'm not sure if I don't know off the top of my head about yeah, like specific formal, specific formal action alerts.
Something like, even something like you mentioned a bill number, like even if you sent an email that had like the particular bill number and the name. And so for those of us who know people in Florida, we can say, hey,
Yeah.
hey, you know, this is the bill that's, you know, you need to look out for. You need to call your legislator, you know, just some language for us to send to people that we know that could possibly be an ally for you all.
Highly recommend this one that I just posted. PEN America is an old organization. It's all about, you know, authors and literature and, you know, free speech for writers of any and all genres. And they have a really, they have a nicely detailed breakdown of what HB 999 looks like. Yeah, so as soon as we have stuff about it, I'll be posting it. But like, you know, they're trying to carve out a provision where student organizations wouldn't be subjected to the same restrictions. And even that is controversial. So like our college chapters of climate advocates, again, because we basically have DEI in our mission statement, that could lead to our college chapters, you know, being shut down on campuses. And I'm hoping that this is too extreme to pass, but something in some form, like they may not get the language that they want, but they're going to pass something along these lines. And any step toward this level of repression and censorship and restriction is just devastating. Sorry, we're like 10 minutes over and I basically took up that whole time myself, but I kind of felt like I had to sound the alarm here.
I'm glad you did, because normally when you, on the political front, when you see things like that, normally Florida can be like a test state of things to come in other, you know, locales. And so thank you for giving us that heads up to know to get ready and you know.
And Carolyn, I just put in chat, I don't know if you know Rachel Wellman from Pine Jog Environmental Education Center.
I believe we've interacted before, but we're not like in regular contact. She I just you were probably weren't able to read the chat. I just put a link to her presentation from the Clean Call a few weeks ago. And she's like desperately looking for people to connect with to talk about some of the stuff happening locally in Florida, and is really trying to make those connections and talk about trying to like flip the script a little bit in Florida. And Lynn said that she's already followed up with her. I know Jim had followed up with her. She's just really a great person to connect with if you're ever feeling like you need to commiserate about Florida. So yeah, I will take a look.
Yeah, I think feel free to share on the Clean Listserv, like you said, any of those resources. And I think it's good to talk about these things. So I know Mark had to hop off because it's 10 after. If we find at any point too, we want to have a call dedicated to this, that's totally fine. Good conversation, and I really do appreciate everyone being here today. And sorry, my internet has been so bad. Cutting in and out.
I don't hold it against you personally.
Thank you.
Thank you, because it's, you know, I said we're kind of in the fight of our lives here, and it can feel very isolating, and it really does sort of help give you the fortitude to pick up and, you know, have another day to go at it when you know that there are really like smart, qualified, passionate folks in your corner. So having, you know, having communities like this that, you know, that you can talk to and, yeah, commiserate with, it definitely helps sort of give you what you need to, you know, pick yourselves up after each blow. So I do definitely appreciate the support, and I will keep you all updated with with what's going on over here.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Carolyn, for facilitating today. It was a really, really good conversation. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.